What is up guys, Stu here. So the next film at the festival was one of my more anticipated ones. One of the ones which I was just interested and excited to see how this was going to turn out. And that was Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria. And the press screening for this one was at 8:30 in the morning. In IMAX. I didn't need my coffee. It's nothing quite like a horror film on one of the biggest screens out there to wake you up in the morning. It was a tough day. And this one is Guadagnino's retelling of the iconic horror classic, also titled Suspiria, which came out in the 70s by Dario Argento. And this one is nuts. Absolutely batshit. I loved it. And maybe that's not such a big surprise considering Guadagnino's last film, Call Me By Your Name, was my favourite of last year and one of my favourites of the decade. I've not really made that much of a sequel on the channel, but I was incredibly impressed with just how different this was to Call Me By Your Name. It's an entirely different beast, but it's also definitely going to prove to be one of the most divisive films of the year for a lot of people. But I just can't help but admire the vision and passion of Guadagnino as an artist at this point. I will pretty much watch anything he puts out now, it's a guarantee. And here he's done the arguably near impossible feat of taking an incredibly iconic horror classic which is beloved by so many and turning it into something that's his own. It doesn't feel like it shits on the original and does its own new, fresh thing. And in my opinion, that's absolutely the best way to go about remaking something like this. There's so many ways this could have gone wrong, and I'm happy to say that, for me at least, it didn't really fall into any of those traps. Because it's the age-old question when you come at anything that's so iconic as the original of this film, is how do you possibly do something that's new and does justice to that? And the answer here, in the case of Guadagnino's Suspiria, is you just kind of do your own thing, just do as much differently as you want, and you just kind of hope that people are along for the ride. He makes some really interesting and bold decisions as a director. For one, he swaps out the incredibly iconic, vivid, wonderful, amazing colour palette of Dario Argento's original with a much more kind of muted, green, grey, almost clinical colour palette here. He swaps Goblin's pulsating score from the original with a much more kind of somber, melancholic Tom York, and he moves the action into a more central, literally divided Berlin in the 70s. And it's all these kind of different bits of reframing which I think work incredibly well in a film to make it feel like its own new thing. And I think that might prove to be immediately a little bit more jarring and difficult to get on board with for like die-hard fans of the original film here, but I thought it worked really well to add in these new kind of layers, because the original Suspiria, and this is not a negative for that film, but it does feel quite simple in its story and its approach to the way it goes about telling it, whereas this one kind of evolves the old story and adds in new different elements to plot here to make it just feel much more richer as a film overall. But that allows Guadagnino to explore different themes that weren't there in the original, and also to sort of explore different fears that you don't really get in the original. And you can almost see where the seeds of those things were born from the original, and you can almost imagine Guadagnino watching the original going, I want to do that with it. Now, I think that's really cool. It's a really awesome way to look at making a piece of art. Because that's kind of what this is. It's a very art house look at the horror genre, which I think is what's going to be mainly putting off a lot of audiences. The fear with this one is that you get a lot of people expecting it to be this big, huge, terrifying new horror film. And I don't really think it is that at the end of the day. It's got a lot more meat on its bone, which I really don't know how it's going to sit with a lot of genuine horror fans here. It's going to be very divisive and polarizing in that sense. One of the things I do think was quite an interesting addition to the film, which I didn't really expect to see in there, was the way that it was set within this social political backdrop of terrorism in Berlin at this time period. And although arguably I think there's a case to be made for the fact that that could have been woven in a little bit more obviously into the mix here, I do like the fact that it's there, and it does help to bring up these kind of parallels between power dynamics within stuff that's going on with the terrorist factions in Berlin at this point, and also the coven that we're following through the film. For one, it means that you're kind of let in on the mystery of this film a lot earlier than the original. Maybe that's down to the fact that the original already exists, so people are going into this with an expectation of knowing where the story's going. But I think it absolutely speaks to the intentions of Luca here in remaking such a classic, and that it's not so much interested in Susie as a character's discovery of this coven as much as it is about the actual dynamics of what's going on within that coven that she inevitably will end up dancing with. Pun intended. And as a result of that, I do feel like it can feel a little bit like Dakota Johnson doesn't quite get as much as you'd expect her to be working with here. I was surprised to see that she really doesn't feel like the main forefront of the film, and as such can feel a little bit underwhelming there. But luckily we do get a whole load of Tilda in the film, who's given a lot to work with, and she absolutely shines. I adore Tilda Swinton to no end. I think she's one of the best actresses working ever, period. And here she's absolutely fantastic, and just a joy to watch as this central dance teacher, Blanc, who clearly has a lot a lot more to her than meets the eye. She just totally owns that, and I really like the way it leans into this kind of more modern vision of an artist trying to help people get into her work. I thought that was a cool avenue to go down. But she does also get kind of twice the work in playing an old man in a film. It's not a secret at this point anymore. I'm pretty sure she came out and said, yeah, it is me. But one of the characters in this film is this old man. It's never said in the film that it's Tilda Swinton. He's billed in the cast as a separate actor called Lutz Eberdorf, I think. But it's Tilda. It's Tilda as an old man. I'm not entirely sure, having watched the film and let it sit with me for a while, the exact purpose of having her play this old man in the film. I'm sure there's something there. But she is great. I actually thought his character was one of the more meaty and interesting characters of the film. So double Tilda, man, I'm a fan. I was surprised most by Mia Goth's performance in the film. I don't know, I didn't expect her to be as prominent in the film as she was, and I thought she did a fantastic job with everything there. Yeah, performances across the board are all great, and it really does help to sell this dynamic of the characters in this film, where you've got these kind of naive, almost panicked students versus these much more creepy, sinister, omnipotent teachers in the school. It all really helps add to this incredibly unnerving atmosphere throughout the film, and that's almost what I want to come back to on the fact that it doesn't really feel like it's a scary, scary film overall, so much as it does just feel like it unsettles you, and it works to get under your skin in different ways there. That's not to say there aren't the shocking moments in there, because fuck me, there are. One particular one we've seen advertised a lot through the trailers and marketing, where someone is sort of possessed and her body is manipulated. Let's put it like that. It is horrible, and it's an absolutely incredible sequence, which blends amazing cross-cutting and horrible effects. It's crazy. There's moments like that through the film where you're like, this is horrible. I feel a little bit sick watching this. It's not one to shy away from the gore, particularly when you get to the climax of this film. But overall, I would class it as much more of a kind of unsettling, unnerving film, more so than a like, bam, look how scary this is sort of film. And it's all the more interesting given Luca Guadagnino's previous film. I mean, it's amazing seeing him go from the more kind of sensual, romantic side of things in Call Me By Your Name into this much darker, sinister tone here. It's fascinating even. It's just interesting to see the way that his talents as a director lend himself to two very, very different genres and different moods here. But that's a thread which I think he somehow manages to tap into much better than many other working directors today, and that is the mood. He has this incredible feel for the mood of a moment and an atmosphere. And then you layer on top of that Tom York score, which is incredible. It comes in and out of the film at these different points, and I think every moment works spectacularly with it. It begins and ends the film, and I just loved it. I think Tom York's a genius in his own right. The pairing of him and Luca Guadagnino with a film like this isn't perhaps the most obvious, but it works wonders for that. And although it's clearly very different to Goblin's original score, I think it's better. Shoot me. But it's all of these different elements which ends up inevitably building through to this crazy climax in the film, and that's the thing which I think is going to be particularly divisive to audiences. The first half of this film is its own thing, and you're either in or you're not, I think. But I think it's the last act of the film which is going to be the one people are talking about a lot. There's either some questionable or genius prosthetic work in the film here, whatever way you would decide to look at it there. And if there's such a thing as going too far with blood and guts in a horror film, it's quite close. Luckily it didn't quite lose me, and I came out of this film and I just thought, what have I just seen in the best way possible? I really have not been able to stop thinking about this film since I saw it. It's got its claws into me, and I absolutely want to go and see it again. Even though it's like a 2.5 hour runtime, it absolutely flew by for me. I don't know if anyone else got that. Feels a lot like Guadagnino's sort of taken the story from the first one, added all these different ingredients into it, into a saucepan, and just kind of let it stew, and it never really serves it up for you. It just lets you sit and soak in and watch everything stewing together. I fucking loved it, and it's only got better and better as I've sat and thought about it since watching it. Absolutely cannot wait to see this one again. I'm happy to say that whilst I don't think it's Guadagnino's best work, I do think it's made its way into my best of the year list. I'm not quite sure where at this point, but fuck, it's crazy. But what about you guys? Have you seen Suspiria yet? If you have, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. I'm very interested to see how you felt about some of the things that ended up happening in this film. As usual, if you like this video and you do want to see me talk about more shit, please do consider clicking subscribe. Really helps me out, but also means you won't be missing any more from the film festival that I've got coming out for you guys. If you haven't noticed, a new review every day, baby. If you haven't already, check out the StuTalks podcast, which is a podcast that I run usually every week, but at the moment we're doing a couple of different London Film Festival specials where we're diving deeper into some of my thoughts on some of the films I've seen at the festival. We will be going into more depth on Suspiria, so if you want to see more deeper thoughts on that, tune into that later in the week. Links to that in the description down below. I'm off to never ever go anywhere near a dance school ever again. Until next time, stay beautiful, mother truckers.